May 9th, 1941. The sea is a hard grey mirror under a low sky, the kind of light that flattens detail and turns men's faces into cutouts. On the forward deck of HMS Bulldog, the salt spray smells of diesel and fear. Sailors in oilskins move like clockwork, voices kept low, boots clapping a rhythm against steel. A captured U-boat sits dead in the water a few yards away, its conning tower a black tooth against the horizon. Men clamber across a gangway. Someone jerks a torch, making a small, desperate sun in the gloom. In the bowels of the submarine, within a narrow, humming room, an array of brass and bakelite that looks nothing like a weapon is crated and hauled up. Glass lamp boards, a wheel of rotors stamped with letters, a tangle of cables, and a wooden case of papers tied with twine. The machine that made German secrets look like gibberish has been pulled screaming into daylight. You can feel the sudden animal electricity in the air. Officers exchange glances that are not quite smiles. Petty officers who have seen too much lean in as if to read the future from the machine's scratches and plugs. A petty officer runs a gloved finger along the Enigma's keyboard. Simple, round keys like a typewriter, but smaller, more intimate. The lamp board still smells faintly of oil and old paper. Someone whispers, "Stecker Brett," and the word clicks in the ears of men who know, in a way civilians never will, the difference between a captured ship and a captured door into the enemy's head. 2,000 miles inland, in a country house surrounded by clipped hedges, Bletchley Park's windows glow yellow into the night. The house is made of brick and history, but the lawn is a stage for a quieter, stranger war. Inside, corridors that had echoed with clinking teacups now echo with the flip of teleprinter tape and the shuffle of boots across rugs. Young women in uniform, WWIIs and WAFs, sit at long tables, hands flying over typewriters and paper on which strings of letters clap like hail. Men in civilian coats move between rooms, carrying files and machines, faces pinched with concentration. At the heart of that maze is a man with a particular restlessness. Alan Turing, Cambridge Don turned government cryptanalyst, hair perpetually a little disheveled, eyes always calculating the next move. When the Enigma crates from the Bulldog arrive at Bletchley weeks later, they are unremarkable to anyone but the initiated. Wooden boxes, stamped with naval marks, full of mundane-seeming gear and wet paperwork. But within those wet pages are the thin and brittle tracings of the Kriegsmarine's daily life. Code books, keys for cipher wheels, short signals that sailors use to keep themselves alive. For the staff at Bletchley, the cargo reads like a map of intentions. Convoys on certain channels, patrol zones, the language of orders that could be unspooled into locations and timings. It is the kind of small thing that can tilt a battle. Turing is not the first to have a crack at Enigma. The story begins years earlier in a different weather. Mathematicians in Poland in the late 1920s and 1930s labored over Enigma's permutations and found a way in. Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zygalski, their names are whispered in Bletchley corridors like a litany, had used permutation theory and clever physical tricks to reconstruct German wiring long before war made the continent a map of ruin. Their techniques and the machine they built, the Bombe, would arrive in British hands and live again in a new form at Bletchley. But those Polish breakthroughs had been only part of the work. The Germans kept changing settings and adding the plug board, the Stecker Brett, making the cipher's possibilities explode beyond simple brute force. That is where Turing's mind meets the problem. He stands in a small office lit by a single lamp, a pile of code books at his elbow, and a cigarette burned down to the filter. The problem is monstrous but precise. Enigma's security is not in a single secret, but in an astronomical number of settings. Rotors can be placed in different orders. Each rotor can be set to 100 and some positions. The plug board swaps letters pairwise. Each change of the day's keys multiplies the number of possible wirings. The human approach, sit and test each possibility, is madness. What is required is a machine to sift possibility, a mechanical reason that will follow the logic of permutations to their inevitable contradictions. On paper, Turing writes equations and sketches diagrams. He talks with colleagues, Gordon Welchman, Hugh Alexander, Dilly Knox, and a small, improbable workforce builds up around the project. Chess champions, classicists, linguists, crossword obsessives, and mathematicians. They are united by one trait, an appetite for pattern. They joke sometimes to keep the vertigo at bay. We are the ones who do the crosswords for victory. But in the hut rooms, the jokes are thin as paper. The girls who operate the machines work in a hush, listening for the machine to click in a way that means yes. That means a setting has been ruled out, or is possibly right. The device Turing envisages borrows a metaphor that brings mathematics into motion, the bomb. Not a bomb of destruction, but a bomb of logic, a machine that will run through permutations faster than any clock. It will not break Enigma in a single blow. Instead, it will slam doors on impossibilities and open a narrow window where the actual settings must live. Turing's early designs are wooden frames, racks of wiring and rotating drums. Each drum represents a rotor. Each drum's wiring represents the permutation concealed inside the German wheel. As the drums turn and the machine cycles, electrical contacts trace possibilities. When a contradiction appears, a path that would map a letter to itself impossibly, the machine stops the drum and marks that row as unusable. The idea is almost elegant enough to be cruel. Let the machine do the boring, relentless work of elimination until, by exhaustion, the right setting is left blinking. But machines are slow to build in wartime mud. Components are scarce. Secrecy is absolute. The engineers are often men who have never made anything more complicated than a radio. There is a human choreography behind every operational bomb. Electricians bending under benches, a WAF on shift at 3 a.m., a tea urn on the landing, the whole house smelling faintly of print and oil and cigarette smoke. Above all is the hush of secrecy. Even the gardeners at Bletchley are told to keep off the grass. People step around the rooms with a special caution, because to be caught talking is to lose the advantage that might save thousands of lives. Outside Bletchley, the war grinds. U-boat wolf packs circle convoys, and the Atlantic is a long, hot ledger of names and ships and coordinates. Admirals and young captains, men in mucky coats and young sons who will never return, lean over grainy charts and mutter the names of places they hope to reach. The intelligence that comes from the decoded Enigma, Ultra, as the secret would be code-named, does not scream into public life. It arrives as a small lamp, a telegram, a whispered directive. Reroute the convoy. Turn east at 300. The U-boat is shadowing you 200 miles to the west. War is moved by such nudges, invisible hands guiding ships through the dark. This first night, with the Enigma crates drying under the headlights back in the dock and the sea still cold beyond, the scale of the endeavor is not yet visible. What is visible is simpler. The machine on a table, a young woman tracing a row of letters with her finger, a mathematician imagining a machine that can think in permutations. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticks like a metronome. The future of the Code War is a slow, mechanical heartbeat, and the people at Bletchley are learning to listen. Bletchley Park, autumn of 1940. Rain slicks the glass panes of Hut 8, tapping in irregular rhythms. Morse code written by the weather. Inside, the air hums faintly from the electricity running through prototype circuits. Cigarette smoke hangs above the tables in thin grey ribbons. There, among the organized chaos of wiring diagrams, scattered pages, and cold cups of tea, sits Alan Turing. His face is pale in the lamplight, the kind of intensity that lives somewhere between genius and exhaustion. He stares at a diagram pinned to the wall. 3 circles representing the Enigma's rotors, lines connecting letter pairs in a web of impossible combinations. In his mind, those lines are moving, rotating, flipping positions thousands of times a second. He hears the Enigma's logic like a musical score. Each rotor shift a change of key, every letter pressed on the German keyboards transposed into a new cipher harmony. Turing mutters to himself, what if contradiction could be a clue? It's the question that births the Bombe. The German Enigma, in essence, was a machine of deception, elegant in its simplicity, terrifying in its implications. Every German division, ship and command post relied on it, believing its codes unbreakable. Each morning at midnight, the operators changed the machine's configuration. 3 rotors out of a possible 8, each set to one of 26 positions, plus the plug board, 10 pairs of wires swapping letters unpredictably. The total number of possible configurations exceeded 150 quintillion. Even with Bletchley's best minds, no human could test that many combinations in a lifetime. So Turing's plan was not to test everything, but to eliminate impossibilities faster than they appeared. He called it Banbarismus, a method of using logic and probability to prune the tree of possible keys. The Bombe would take known pieces of plain text, called cribs, and test whether they could logically exist under specific machine settings. If a contradiction appeared, that setting was discarded. If not, it was flagged as a potential key. It was the birth of a mechanical brain. In the next hut, an engineer named Harold Keane from the British Tabulating Machine Company bends over the first Bombe prototype, its rows of drums glinting in the light. Each drum corresponds to an Enigma rotor, whirring and clicking in sync with others, 108 in total. Cables trail across the floor, labeled meticulously. When the switch is thrown, the machine growls to life, a deep mechanical purr that fills the room. Dozens of young wrens, the Women's Royal Naval Service, stand by, notebooks ready. The rhythmic clicking of the bomb becomes their soundtrack, the heartbeat of hidden war. A supervisor calls out, "Test crib, message intercept Atlantic sector." Someone feeds the tape into the machine, and the bomb begins its relentless logic dance. Every letter tested, every contradiction marked. Hours pass. The room fills with the clatter of relay switches, the smell of warm metal, and the distant ticking of time. Then, a pause. The machine halts. A light glows faintly red. The operator turns to her officer and says quietly, "Possible stop. Candidate key found." When those words echo through Hut 8 for the first time, Turing doesn't celebrate. He simply nods, almost absently, and reaches for a pencil. The real test comes next. The key is tried on an actual intercepted message. One of the teleprinter girls, barely 20, feeds the tape through a separate decoding device. The letters begin to appear on the strip. At first it's nonsense. Then words start forming. U-boat, grid square BE, patrol ordered north. The room freezes. No one breathes. For the first time, they've read the enemy's voice. Not a guess, not luck, but a perfect translation of German command traffic. News of the success spreads quietly, almost secretly, through Bletchley's corridors. There are no medals, no cheers. The operators still clock out on time, still ride their bicycles home through misty lanes, never speaking a word to anyone. Yet from that day on, the daily runs of the bomb become ritual. In one hut, a dozen bombs are lined up like titans asleep in a factory. Each one is named Victory, Agnus Dei, Jumbo. Their synchronized clicking is deafening, yet almost soothing. The wrens in their dark uniforms move between them like attendants in a mechanical cathedral, checking cables, noting stops, marking possibilities. By dawn, data from the night's runs is relayed to analysts who piece together the decrypted fragments into usable intelligence. Convoy attack expected. Submarine positions shifted east. air patrols advised. Each line of code cracked could mean 100 sailors surviving another day. But Turing's work isn't just mechanical, it's philosophical. He sees the bomb not merely as a machine, but as a thought experiment made real. To him, logic and mechanism are two sides of the same truth. A machine, he once told a colleague, can imitate thought if only we give it the means to do so. He would pace the garden outside Hut 8, talking to himself, running through chains of reasoning no one else could quite follow. His colleagues joked that he lived half in mathematics and half in fog. But Turing's fog was fertile ground. It's where the notion of the modern computer first took shape. The bomb, in its way, was an ancestor to everything that would follow: computing, automation, artificial intelligence. Yet to Turing, it was still just a weapon. One designed to save lives. Meanwhile, beyond the hedges of Bletchley Park, the war in the Atlantic was reaching fever pitch. German wolf packs hunted merchant convoys relentlessly. Ships burned in the night like floating pyres. Allied losses were catastrophic. Thousands of tons of supplies lost each week. The Royal Navy fought blind in a sea that belonged to the enemy. But now, with Enigma keys decrypted faster and more regularly, those blindfolds began to slip. Each time a U-boat commander sent a signal back to headquarters, thinking it secure, Turing's machines were already working to read it. Within hours, the Admiralty could reroute convoys, direct destroyers to intercept positions, or ambush wolf packs in their hunting grounds. The tide of the Atlantic began, imperceptibly at first, to turn. Late one evening, Turing walks through the bomb room alone. The machines clatter like distant artillery. Their lights blink in rhythm, methodical and tireless. He watches them and thinks of the men at sea, the sailors who will live or die depending on what these machines uncover tonight. He murmurs, almost to himself, "We're fighting ghosts with ghosts." Because that's what this war of code had become, a ghost war. Invisible, silent, fought not with guns or planes, but with logic, wires, and faith that intellect could outthink destruction. The rain outside intensifies. The glass shakes with each rumble of thunder, but the bombs continue their steady rhythm. The heartbeat of hidden intelligence, the pulse of a war fought in silence. And in that quiet, amidst the whir of wheels and relays, Alan Turing's machines are winning. By early 1942, the hidden war inside Bletchley Park was reaching a crescendo. The huts no longer slept. Day and night, relays clicked, teleprinters spat out reams of code, and bicycles leaned in neat rows outside the gate as a new shift arrived to replace the last. Inside Hut 8, Turing's bombs ran in synchronized fury, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But this was no longer a mere mathematical puzzle. The intelligence that Bletchley was producing had a name now: Ultra, the highest classification of secrecy in the British war machine. Only a handful of generals and admirals even knew what it meant. What had begun as a theoretical exercise in logic had become one of the most decisive weapons in the Allied arsenal. The world outside didn't know. They couldn't, because every victory achieved through Enigma's decryption had to look like coincidence or good luck. Convoy escorts were randomly reassigned. Bombing raids just happened to hit supply depots before the Germans could move. U-boat wolf packs found themselves ambushed in the open ocean by destroyers that just happened to be in the area. To reveal how they knew would be to kill the advantage. The Germans could never suspect that their unbreakable Enigma was already bleeding secrets across British desks before their ink even dried. In the Admiralty War Room in London, maps of the Atlantic sprawled across vast tables. Colored pins marked convoys, wolf packs, and air patrols. Admirals pored over decoded intelligence sheets stamped "Most Secret Ultra." Every day, Turing's team sent them updates decoded from the German naval Enigma. Positions of U-boats, refueling coordinates, and orders straight from Admiral Dönitz himself. The information was so precise it bordered on supernatural. An officer once muttered, "It's as though we have a spy in Dönitz's own office." He wasn't far from the truth, but the war of intelligence was more than mathematics. It was also a war of nerves, fought in smoke-filled rooms on typewriters and in the silence of those who knew too much. Each operator, each clerk at Bletchley Park, signed the Official Secrets Act. They were forbidden to tell even their families what they did. A typist might be decoding the location of a German battleship one moment, then be back home that evening pretending to have spent the day filing weather reports. Husbands and wives worked in adjacent huts without knowing the other's purpose. The rule was absolute. Do not talk, not to anyone. In one hut, a group of wrens, young women barely out of school, huddled around a teleprinter, translating intercepted messages. They weren't told what the texts meant or where they came from. Just letter chains, coordinates, short German phrases. One of them once paused and whispered, "It's like listening to ghosts talk to each other." Her supervisor gave her a look. Not cruel, just tired. "Then keep listening," she said. "They'll lead us to the living." The unseen consequences of their work rippled outward. A convoy saved from ambush, a bombing raid redirected, a city spared. But the operators never saw that. They lived in the silence of their own small victories, unaware of the lives saved beyond the wire fences. Still, the Germans weren't idle. By early 1942, they began to suspect their naval codes were being compromised. Admiral Karl Dönitz ordered a new Enigma variant, the four-rotor Enigma, used exclusively by the Kriegsmarine's U-boat fleet. It was a nightmare. The addition of a fourth rotor multiplied the number of possible configurations exponentially. Overnight, the messages that Bletchley had been reading went dark again. Entire weeks of work vanished into static. Convoys once again sailed blind. The Atlantic began to bleed. Turing's response was calm, almost eerily so. He gathered his team and quietly said, "Then we build faster." New bombs were commissioned, more complex, more powerful. The engineers at the British Tabulating Machine Company in Letchworth worked around the clock, wiring circuits and calibrating drums. Women from the Wrens volunteered to relocate to secret outstations across the countryside, where dozens of bombs were installed in cold, concrete rooms. Their task, to find the new Enigma keys before morning. It was grueling work. Each bomb could test tens of thousands of settings per minute, but there were billions to eliminate. The operators worked in 12-hour shifts, ears ringing from the constant mechanical drumming. They drank tea that had gone cold, ate sandwiches one-handed, and never complained. Every stop, every flicker of a light meant another step toward clarity, another shadow pushed back across the Atlantic. And sometimes, the Code War turned deadly in ways the cipher clerks never saw. A young man in British intelligence once remarked that the best cover story for Ultra is sacrifice. When a convoy had to be lost to maintain the illusion that Enigma was still unbroken, the Admiralty allowed it. Ships were sunk. Men died. Not because the information hadn't come through, but because using it would have revealed the truth to the enemy. Those decisions haunted the officers who made them, but they knew the alternative. If Germany realized Enigma was compromised, the war would grow longer, bloodier, perhaps unwinnable. Turing understood this cold arithmetic better than anyone. He once told a colleague, "Sometimes the hardest logic isn't in the machine. It's in the morality of using what it gives us." By late 1942, after months of relentless work, Bletchley struck back. A captured U-boat off the coast of Africa yielded crucial cipher material, rotor settings, operation logs, and an Enigma machine in working order. It was the crack in the wall they needed. Within weeks, the four-rotor code was breached. The messages began flowing again. U-boat movements, refueling orders, tactical reports. The Atlantic, once a graveyard, became a hunting ground for the Allies. Ultra was alive again. That same winter, Turing sat alone in his hut, typing a short report to the Admiralty. His tone was clinical, detached, but between the lines was triumph. He ended it with a single understated line. The intelligence derived from the bombs continues to provide significant naval advantage. Outside, snow was falling across the lawns of Bletchley Park, muffling the night. The huts glowed warm with lamplight, the hum of machinery steady and reassuring. In that quiet moment, the mathematician who had imagined logic as weapon could almost believe the war might one day be won by reason. And yet in his mind, the question remained, if a machine could think logically to save lives, could one day a machine think at all? Spring, 1943, North Atlantic. The sea is dark as gunmetal, heaving beneath a low ceiling of cloud. Waves strike the hulls of merchant ships in dull, booming intervals. Somewhere within the convoy, a signalman adjusts his headset, waiting for orders that could mean life or death. Hundreds of miles away, deep in the English countryside, those orders are already being written, not by admirals or generals, but by a handful of exhausted men and women staring at deciphered German messages inside a quiet brick mansion. Bletchley Park, Hut 8. A new day begins, though time has lost meaning here. The wrens on shift bring tea and sandwiches to the long wooden tables where the night crew is finishing its run. The bombs, now numbering over 200 across Britain, have been running without pause. Their low, steady rumble can be felt through the floorboards, like the vibration of distant thunder. Alan Turing arrives, slightly late as usual, cycling up the gravel drive with trouser clips still fastened. His coat flaps open in the wind. He locks his bike against the same tree he always does, oblivious to the rain. Inside, he wipes his glasses with a sleeve and looks over the night's results. Dozens of decrypts marked possible, a handful labeled confirmed. The first message is chilling. U-boat Group Sea Wolf ordered to attack convoy HX-231, grid BE-48. Turing reads it twice. The convoy's position is already known. The Royal Navy can intercept. He looks up at his team. "We send it now," he says simply. And with that, the Battle of the Atlantic begins to turn. For nearly 3 years, German U-boats had ruled these waters. The wolf packs, directed by precise radio coordination, had hunted in silence. The Atlantic had become a graveyard. More than 2,000 Allied ships lost, tens of thousands of sailors vanished into the deep. But now, with Ultra feeding the Admiralty daily, those predators were being hunted in turn. Every German signal, thought safe by its sender, became a trap laid bare to British ears. In the underground war rooms beneath London, Admiral Sir Max Horton reads the decoded reports from Bletchley with clinical focus. Colored pins shift on the Atlantic map as destroyers are rerouted to intercept coordinates derived from Turing's machines. Horton rarely asks how the information comes. He simply trusts it. His orders go out encrypted again, faster this time, deadlier. Convoy reroute. Turn 20 degrees north. Engage at dawn. And hundreds of miles away, a U-boat commander suddenly finds his convoy, gone, vanished into fog. Hours later, depth charges thunder above his hull. He never knows that his own message betrayed him. At Bletchley, the mood changes subtly. The staff begin to see that their invisible labor is shifting the shape of the war. The statisticians notice the trend first: fewer sinkings, shorter wolf pack lifespans, fewer missing reports from the Admiralty. One young wren marks a pattern on the chalkboard, tracing convoy losses month by month. She turns to her supervisor, voice trembling. "Sir, they're dropping." The officer just nods. "Then keep the machines running." They do. Day after day, night after night, hundreds of bombs whir in synchronized rhythm. in Bletchley, at outstations in Adstock, Stanmore, Wavendon, and Eastcote. The sound is relentless, the rolling drum of logic chasing logic. When a stoplight flashes, a wren hurries over, marks the possible settings, and the machine restarts its mechanical sprint through possibility. Each flicker of light means another step toward cracking a day's key. Each day's key means another victory, unseen but vital. But the work takes its toll. The analysts live on black tea and cigarettes. Sleep comes in fragments, food in hurried bites. The operator's fingers blister from endless typing. Some collapse under the strain. Others are transferred quietly, their replacements arriving the next day. Alan Turing, for his part, becomes more withdrawn. His colleagues describe him as gentle, almost childlike, but unreachable when lost in thought. He runs along the country roads at dawn, a thin figure in shorts and muddy trainers, his mind still chasing algorithms. Sometimes he speaks to no one for hours, lost in equations only he understands. Yet when he returns to the huts, he is electric, proposing improvements, sketching designs, challenging engineers to build faster, smarter, cheaper machines. Each second saved is another ship not sunk, he says. And they believe him. By summer 1943, the results are undeniable. In the Battle of the Atlantic, the hunter has become the hunted. Convoy after convoy now crosses safely. U-boat losses skyrocket. 40 in May. Alone, an unimaginable figure a year earlier. The tide has turned decisively, though almost no one outside the intelligence community understands why. The newspapers print headlines: U-boat menace crumbling, Allied convoys triumph in the Atlantic. But the truth, the machines, the mathematicians, the endless nights at Bletchley Park, remains buried under the weight of secrecy. That summer, Winston Churchill visits Bletchley Park for the first time. He is led through the huts quietly, his cigar smoke curling through the narrow corridors. He pauses before one of the bomb rooms, watching the machines churn, his eyes bright behind the haze. Turning to his escort, he says softly, "So these are the geese that lay the golden eggs and never cackle." The phrase sticks. It becomes how Bletchley's people think of themselves. Silent geese laying invisible victories. Churchill's orders are immediate. Give them everything they need. Resources flow in. More bombs are built, more personnel are recruited. Bletchley expands like a living organism, a secret city within the countryside. Still, within the heart of the operation, Turing's thoughts are already turning elsewhere. He is designing new systems, machines not just for breaking ciphers, but for learning them. The first sketches of what he calls a universal machine, a device that could imitate any logical process, begin appearing in his notebooks. It's the seed of modern computing, planted amid the chaos of war. But for now, victory comes not from theory, but from perseverance. Each message cracked, each convoy saved, each U-boat sunk. These are the tangible proofs that logic, patience, and machine intelligence can triumph over tyranny. Late one night, as the bombs click on and the rain hisses against the windows, Turing lingers by one of the machines. The operator beside him yawns softly, glancing at the dials. He says, almost to himself, "You know, we're teaching these things to think faster than us." The operator smiles faintly. "Then I hope they think of the right side." Turing laughs, a short, tired sound, and walks back into the rain. Above him, somewhere over the Atlantic, another convoy changes course, not knowing the ghostly hands that guided them. The sea swallows the evidence, and the machines keep whispering through the night. Section 5. The Silent Victory. The Fall of Enigma and the Birth of Computing Spring, 1944. The world is gathering for the storm. Across southern England, the fields are filled with men and machines, American, British, Canadian divisions assembling for what will soon be known as D-Day. But before a single landing craft touches Normandy's beaches, another war must be won. The war of intelligence. Every message, every whisper from Berlin, every encrypted transmission from German High Command, all must be read, predicted, and countered. And that means one thing: the bombs must keep running. Bletchley Park hums like a living creature now. The estate is no longer a quiet manor, but a self-contained nerve center of global war. Dozens of huts and outstations, thousands of staff, hundreds of machines, all coordinated by an intelligence web that no one outside a select few even knows exists. In Hut 8, Alan Turing moves quietly between desks, his hair unkempt, his clothes rumpled, his mind 3 steps ahead of the present. He checks a report marked Decodes, Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe Traffic, May 1944. Each decrypted signal paints a clearer picture of German defenses along the French coast, the placement of panzer divisions, the timing of supply convoys, the reinforcement schedules from Calais to Normandy. He understands something few others do. This is the culmination. Years of logic, of sleepless nights, of ceaseless noise from the machines. All of it leading here. Every cracked message now contributes to the deception plan known as Operation Fortitude, feeding the Germans false intelligence about an invasion near Pas-de-Calais. Enigma, the machine once thought unbreakable, now unknowingly delivers lies back to its masters. On June 5, 1944, Bletchley Park receives the last crucial signal before the invasion. The German 15th Army, reading its own encrypted messages, remains stationed north, precisely where the Allies want them to be. When dawn breaks on June 6th, D-Day, the beaches of Normandy explode with fire and steel. Over 150,000 men crossed the Channel under cover of deception, timing, and intelligence precision. The Germans are caught utterly by surprise. Their reaction is delayed, fragmented. Their reinforcements move too late. Inside Hut 8, a group of wrens crowd around a radio as BBC bulletins trickle in. Allied forces have landed in France. No one cheers. They simply exchange glances, a quiet understanding that their invisible war has helped open the door to liberation. Somewhere in the chaos of Normandy, soldiers live because of a line of logic written on paper months before. As Europe burns toward its endgame, the work at Bletchley doesn't slow. Every day still brings new intercepts, retreat orders, rail schedules, desperate encrypted pleas from collapsing German units. By spring 1945, Enigma is fully compromised. Bletchley's analysts can read most traffic in near real time. The code that once represented German superiority has become a liability. The Allies move with uncanny foresight, knowing enemy plans before they unfold. One decrypted message, sent by a German general in the final weeks, read bitterly, "The enemy anticipates every move. There must be spies in our highest ranks." But there were no spies, only machines and minds faster than theirs. April 1945. The war in Europe is nearly over. The bombs run slower now, their purpose fading with each passing day. The staff begin receiving transfer orders. Some return to universities, others to civilian life. They sign new oaths of secrecy, to never speak of what they've done. Alan Turing, now thin, hollow-eyed and restless, walks through the nearly silent corridors of Bletchley Park one last time. The rooms that once buzzed with relentless clatter are still. The tables are bare. The walls smell faintly of oil and dust. He stops before one of the bombs, its drums idle for the first time in years. He rests a hand on its frame. The metal is cool. For a long moment, he just stands there, listening to the quiet. The silence feels unnatural, almost eerie after years of mechanical thunder. Then he whispers, half to himself, "Well done." Outside, a truck waits to transport the machines to storage, or in most cases, destruction. Secrecy demands erasure. The official records will vanish, the devices dismantled, the story buried under classified seals that will not open for decades. The operators and mathematicians disperse, their work unspoken, their triumph unseen. To the world, victory comes from generals and armies. The ghosts of Bletchley fade quietly back into ordinary lives. But Alan Turing carries something with him, a vision born in the crucible of code-breaking. He begins to write again, exploring a theory he had toyed with during the war, that a machine could be made to think, not just calculate. His paper on computable numbers will become the foundation for computer science, the blueprint for everything from digital encryption to artificial intelligence. The bomb had not only broken Enigma, it had opened a door to a new age. May 8, 1945. VE Day. London erupts in jubilation. Crowds flood Trafalgar Square. Church bells ring from every tower. Soldiers embrace. Strangers dance, and the sky fills with confetti. But in the countryside, behind the hedges of a quiet estate, the celebration is muted. A few dozen remaining staff at Bletchley Park gather outside the mansion for a final photograph. A moment never meant for public eyes. They smile, but their faces carry the weight of secrets too heavy for joy. They have seen the invisible war, they have watched logic defeat chaos, and they know the price of silence. Years later, when the files are finally declassified, the world will learn what they accomplished. Historians will estimate that the work at Bletchley shortened the war by at least 2 years, saving millions of lives. The bombs, the intercepts, the analysis, all of it a triumph of intellect over brutality. But for Alan Turing, the recognition will come too late. In the decade after the war, he will face persecution, not praise. His own country, the one he helped save, will turn against him for who he was, not what he had done. His final years will end in tragedy, and yet his ideas will outlive him. The world's computers, satellites, and encrypted networks all trace their lineage back to the quiet hum of Bletchley Park's machines. The logic he imagined in darkness became the language of the future. A century will pass, and still the story will echo. How a handful of thinkers, engineers, and operators, armed with pencils, logic, and will, defeated one of the most sophisticated encryption systems ever built. The war was won not just by soldiers in trenches or pilots in the sky, but by the unseen, those who fought a war of intellect in rooms filled with machines that never fired a shot. Their battlefield was silence, their weapon was thought, and their victory eternal.